for you, followed by structured questions. There are 6 of them that should take approximately an hour, which is going to be sort of an opportunity for each candidate to answer one at a time, and then we'll have a short sort of debate window there. Questions from the floor will follow that, as well as questions from the bucket, some closing statements, and then we'll wrap things up and get to that cash bar and fix the middle time. So, if we're all ready to go, let's get her started with the candidate introductions. So these will be opening comments about why they want to be the MLA for Banff-Kananaskis. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to let the audience know who they are, what specific leadership skills they bring to the table, what their priorities would be if they're elected MLA, or really whatever they want to talk about those 90 seconds. And we're going to do this in alphabetical order, so we will start with Kyle Jubb, followed by Miranda Rosen, followed by Reagan Boychuk, and Sarah Almerlini will wrap things up there. So I would like to invite Kyle Jubb to take the microphone and start with his opening remarks.
Hello, I'm Kyle Jubb for the Sovereignty, I'm a little nervous here. The Solidarity Movement of Alberta. We are a new party. It just started 3 weeks ago. I'm getting involved, and I'm not a political guy. I'm not getting involved in this because politicians get a 10% hike on their paychecks every time they cause inflation. I'm getting involved with this because the last, well, really since Ralph Klein, I've seen a steady cyclone downhill in how our government's been operated. The last 3 years especially. We are looking to hold the governments accountable. Lower taxes, make everything more affordable for people who live in the area, and stop sexualizing our kids in schools. I have 4 children myself. Some of the stuff I hear around the schools in the area is unacceptable for young children to be dealing with and having to think about, and etc. We should have school to basically teach our kids how to move forward in life. So thank you, and I look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you, Kyle. Up next, Miranda Rosen.
Thank you. Well, I'm Miranda. I was your MLA the past 4 years, and that's because 4 years ago I ran with a goal of building a province where young people like myself could build a future. And I was elected with the United Conservatives on a very clear mandate of jobs and economy. Our future was at stake if Alberta continued down the path that it was on of economic decline. And today, 4 years later, I am so happy to say that Alberta is stronger and more resilient than ever before, and that we are once again leading Canada in growth. That is because of our government's unwavering belief in the Alberta spirit. Through trials and tribulations, we always maintained that Albertans were ingenuitive, hardworking, and self-determinant people who did not need a big government to force progress on them through boutique subsidies or programs, but rather just needed a government who would believe in them as much as they believed in themselves and establish the conditions for them to thrive. So, we lowered taxes, we deregulated the economy, and we relentlessly pursued economic growth, creating over 220,000 jobs across the province and diversified sectors. This growth and fiscal management allowed us to balance Alberta's budget a year ahead of schedule, repay debt, and as a result, invest more into healthcare, mental health, education, infrastructure, and protecting our beautiful outdoors than any government ever before us. Locally, this allowed us to both invest in our Rockies and protect our wild, with upgrades to the Nordic Centre, our first wildlife overpass outside a park, and the expansion of Bow Valley Provincial Park. It's been truly the honor of my life to be your MLA for the last 4 years, and your Secretary for Tourism. And with your support, I hope to get 4 more years and represent you in the provincial government.
Thank you, Miranda. Up next, Reagan Boychuk.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for all of you coming this evening to participate in democracy. I live in the magical Redwood Meadows near Bragg Creek. I'm a father, I'm a roofer, and an engaged citizen, expert in the political economy and the history of Alberta's mighty oil patch. I studied journalism at SAIT, international relations at the University of Calgary, and I have a graduate degree in political science. I was the research director at the University of Alberta's Parkland Institute, and I co-founded the Alberta Liabilities Disclosure Project. And today I'm the Green Party's energy critic. Alberta's facing historic challenges, and there's a recession looming amid comical political gridlock that somehow threatens to re-elect Danielle Smith without offering Albertans much better than what we're already suffering. That's why May 29th is a big opportunity for Albertans to seize control of the government's agenda by voting in line with their interests and forcing a minority government to compromise in a coalition so that Alberta can break the political deadlock of our two-party plutocracy. The Greens would be happy to work with either a UCP or an NDP government on royalty reform at Alberta Energy or regulatory reform at the AER. Despite what they tell you, a better world really is possible. Like Premier Lougheed demonstrated, we just have to think like owners. And May 29th, we have another chance to do that. Thanks.
Reagan. And Sarah Elmaleedy.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude for all of the Treaty 7 First Nations, the Métis, and the generations of land stewards that have come before me that enable me to live the life that I do in our amazing riding. Over the past 16 years, I've been privileged to call Canmore home. Like many of you, I was drawn to live here because of the incredible nature that surrounds us. And also, like many of you, my livelihood depends on the parks and the landscape that sustains us. I've worked as a conservation biologist and a park planner with diverse stakeholders on an array of issues across this vast riding. Think about the problems you've had over the last 4 years: housing, staffing shortages, affordability, access to a doctor. I've experienced those same issues that the UCP has failed to address. The Alberta NDP is competent and has a leader you can trust. We are ready to lead Alberta to a better future. The Alberta NDP has a plan to fix the healthcare crisis, provide affordable housing, support businesses in our valley to thrive, and to welcome millions of visitors to our Bow Valley while also ensuring the sustainability and identity of our mountain communities. In all of my career, one thing has become clear. Everything I have accomplished was because of we. It's never been because of I. Working together, we will build a better future for the Banff-Kananaskis riding. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your opening remarks. We're going to move on to the structured questions. So there are a total of 6 predetermined questions that have been put forward by our host, the Banff and Louise Hospitality Association. Each candidate will have exactly 2 minutes to respond to each question. And following each candidate's answer, we will sort of open it up for an up to 2-minute debate if we want to have a bit more of a conversation between the candidates there. And we'll switch up the order of who answers the questions first to keep it fair here. So the first question has to do with cost of living. And the order for this question would be Miranda, followed by Reagan, followed by Sarah, followed by Kyle. So here is the question. Inflation is eroding away the ability for people to buy general provisions. Given the uniqueness of our communities, what are you going to do to bring cost relief to the communities of Banff, Lake Louise, and the greater Bow Valley? Miranda?
Thank you, Robin. This is an excellent question to start the night off. Absolutely, the cost of living all across the province is skyrocketing. And I think it's important to be clear that this is a direct result of federal policy. The federal government has injected trillions of dollars into our economy, largely debt financed. And it was inevitable that we were going to see inflation months and years down the line. But we're here today and we need to react. And 2 of the most important things that we can do locally is support affordable housing. And I want to talk to that very quickly, and because I imagine there's going to be a question about this coming yet, if I could guess. But one of the most important things we can do is support affordable housing in our valley. And it's a challenge because we don't always have land. We live in this most beautiful place on planet Earth, and we need to be able to develop affordable housing and have places for people to call home, whether it's for 6 months or for the rest of their lives, whether they want to rent or buy. And we've done so much work over the past 4 years to get us to a point where we were able to transfer land to the town of Canmore just a few months ago for affordable housing, to give a foundation that we can build on and give development dollars to in the future once a plan is there, so that people can call home. But more broadly, looking across the province, we believe that the number one thing we can do to help Albertans through the affordability crisis is to allow them to keep more of their hard-earned earned money in their own pockets. And that's why throughout the past 4 years and in our platform, we have not only supported lowering taxes, but we've committed to actually lowering income taxes even further with the introduction of an 8% tax bracket on your first $60,000. So collectively, we have eliminated the fuel tax until the end of the year. which will save people 13 cents a litre at the pumps, and especially if you're driving into Calgary or other places to commute for work, huge savings there. We've re-indexed income taxes, and like I said, are committed to introducing a new, even lower income tax bracket. And for businesses, of which I know many people in this room or even in the Valley are owners of, we've lowered business taxes as well. And today, Albertans have a $20 billion tax advantage to every other citizen in the rest of the country today, and that's the best way that we believe we can support affordability, is to ensure that Albertans can spend their money and make decisions for themselves.
So Reagan again, what are you going to do to bring cost relief to the communities of Banff, Lake Louise, and the Greater Bow Valley?
The cost of living and affordability is obviously the #1 issue knocking on doors in the riding. It's affecting everybody at the grocery store, insurance, all costs are out of control, and housing is #1 thing we heard on doorsteps, whether it was renters at the bottom of the hill or the fancy houses at the top of the hill. Affordability was central. And everybody talks about public housing, and that's nice. It's never going to be sufficient to bring the market prices down, but it is a good thing. And one thing the Green Party would like to do is connect that with a vacancy tax at the top, so that the folks at the top of the income ladder are connected to those at the bottom, and we take from the top to try to make it a little bit more affordable at the bottom. But at the end of the day, affordable communities take planning. It takes effort to create a situation where regular people can afford a decent living. If you leave it up to accident, we get inflation and everybody's scraping by. So there's no easy short-term solution, but we can at least take with one hand and give with the other. Thanks.
Thank you, Reagan. Sarah, what are you going to do to bring cost relief to the communities of Banff, Lake Louise, and the Greater Bow Valley?
You know, this is a great way to start the forum, and this is a really complex issue. The NDP is really looking at affordability from a bunch of different prongs. You know, the reality is that over the last 4 years, our lives have gotten more expensive. The UCP increased our income taxes, they took the cap off utilities, and they took the cap off of tuition. Each of those things increases your monthly bills and your annual expenses. The NDP will make life more affordable by putting a cap back on utility bills, putting a cap and freezing tuition rates for post-secondary students, and freezing car insurance rates. We're also going to re-index and increase seniors' benefit, AISH, and income supports so that no Albertan is left behind. And of course, there may be another question about affordable housing, but affordable housing is essential for the Bow Valley. We are in a housing crisis. The NDP is going to commit to building 8,500 affordable housing units across the province with a focus on the Bow Valley. So a big portion of those housing units will come here. We're also developing a rent bank for evictions so that if people are evicted, have a family emergency, lose their jobs, there's a source of funding for them to turn to cover rent for a couple of months while they figure out what to do next. And that way we'll just be supporting all Albertans and making life more affordable for you.
And finally, Kyle, what are you going to do to bring cost relief to the communities of Banff, Lake Louise, and the Greater Bow Valley?
Yeah, this is a tough question. The valley, as we all know, is very expensive to live in. I would like to start by taking the carbon tax back out. I feel like that's an unnecessary tax that came in several years ago that doesn't need to be there. Also, affordable housing, when people talk about affordable housing, I don't find the units that have been made into affordable housing at $1,200 a room affordable for anyone. So in order to help people pay for their rents to live in this community, I think we need to get the businesses involved and give them some incentives to use maybe the bottom floor. There's a local business in Cameron right now using one wing of their bottom floor to house staff. And yeah, I think we need to stop giving all our money away to the other provinces of Canada before we take care of ourselves first. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. So we're going to open it up to sort of a 2-minute conversation, debate, whatever you want to call it. So this is how it's going to work. If you have something you'd like to add to this conversation, I ask you to put up your hand. When I acknowledge you, you can start talking. If you'd like to interject, put up your hand and I'll give you an opportunity to do that. Does anyone want to start a little conversation on the cost of living? Reagan?
I think one other thing that the Green Party is offering on May 29th that the other parties aren't is a rent cap at 1.5% to help limit the increases in rent that people are suffering these days. Another good idea I just heard recently was creating I think it was activists in Edmonton were setting up a database to keep track so people could put a record of how much they paid in rent when they move out. So there'd be an open record of the next folks to know if their rent went up or not, and hoping for some level of government to take that over as a public service to help manage these rent increases that are squeezing everybody these days.
Do you have something to add, Sarah?
Yeah. I mean, I always have something to add. I'm just trying to be strategic, but the other thing I just want to add that's really important when we talk about affordability for the Bow Valley is the timing of these actions. We can't wait 4 years to transfer lands. We need to actually start building and getting shovels in the ground much sooner. The NDP is committed to addressing affordable housing and affordability from day one. And as somebody who lives here, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to watch your friends leave the valley. I know what it's like to struggle to pay your monthly bills, and I want to address that sooner rather than later.
Miranda?
Yeah, I think it's my turn to jump in because, and I don't want to set this tone for the night, but there's already been 3 sets of misinformation that we've seen from one candidate here tonight, and I think that may be sort of the tone we're going to see, sadly. So I will rebut first the narrative about the affordable housing land transfer. We're not waiting 3 or 4 years to transfer this land to the town of Canmore. In fact, if the town wants to put forward a development plan for the housing tomorrow, we'll be ready to transfer it tomorrow. But municipal developments are never the responsibility of the province. It's typically municipalities that will make their own plans, and will come in and partner with capital funding when the time is right. So I want to correct that first off, and to say, again, my time is up, I will note, but just to say that that land is ready to be transferred as soon as we have a development plan in place.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to question 2. The subject of this one is sustainability. The order for this one will be Reagan, followed by Kyle, followed by Sarah, and then Miranda. So the question is, we live in an area where we are passionate about place and taking care of the natural landscape in and around our communities. How would you maintain a commitment to balancing the interests of tourism, community, and environment? Right?
That is the challenge, but I'm not quite sure whether maintaining the current balance is the answer. There most certainly needs to be a balance, but there's a struggle between development and the sort of protections that citizens wanting to create a decent community need to put in place. And so Banff and Kananaskis means a lot of things to a lot of people, the folks that live out here, the folks that visit it. I lived in Calgary for 30 years, spent every weekend out here rock climbing and snowboarding, but there's all sorts of different interests, but sustainability means a long-term plan within our natural resources, within our capabilities, and making sure we can clean up after ourselves and being able to pay for the sort of society we want to live in. And that's what's missing. That's what's hampering us all these years. We're broke because we collect nothing from our natural resources, and that's our main hindrance to any sort of sustainable development, any sort of decent maintenance of our standard of living is not collecting that money, and without it, nothing can be sustainable. If we can't afford it, we can have all sorts of nice ideas, but funding it is what makes it sustainable, and the Green Party is the only one talking about collecting more, acting like an owner so that we can afford those solutions.
Thank you, Reagan. Next we have Kyle. How would you maintain a commitment to balancing the interests of tourism, community, and the environment?
Well, obviously, tourism is very important in the valley. There's a lot of revenue for everybody. But to be sustainable, yeah, we need to go after our oil and gas, our biggest profit in this province, and I believe our nitrogen as well. I've been hearing lately that combustion engines, they have a plan to turn them into nitrogen gas fueled. So as for tourism and keeping stuff clean, the last few years have been pretty crazy. I mean, I can't find a parking spot when I go to Kananaskis to go hiking. You can't really park anywhere. You're walking up the road probably 2 kilometers to get to anywhere you want to go. Campgrounds you can't get into. So I'm thinking we need to have some kind of transportation system to make that more accessible to everybody, and that's what I would like to see.
Thank you, Kyle. Sarah, how will you maintain a commitment to balancing the interests of tourism, community, and the environment?
Well, I love this question so much. I have so many things I could say, but I'll try to keep it in my 2 minutes, obviously. I participated on the Mayor's Tourism Task Force for the town of Canmore. I had the honor of working with stakeholders across the community discussing this very complex question. And, one thing we really landed on is this idea of regenerative tourism, this idea that tourists come to the valley and they leave it better than how they found it. And there is ways that we can do that. It takes planning and strategy and a long-term approach. I think that we really need to have small business supports in place. A lot of our tourism businesses in the valley are small business. We really need to make sure that they thrive and succeed over time. There are a couple pieces that the NDP will be introducing to support community development specifically. One, we've got a Hometown Alberta fund which will generate funds for municipalities to build ice rinks, renovate existing recreation facilities, seniors development, or anything that is a community gathering space, whether that's for the arts or sports or whatever. I think that our community can benefit from that. We're also going to be introducing a kids activity tax credit, which I feel like the Bow Valley loves. So this is a tax credit for $500 per child per year for you to spend on whatever your kid wants to do. Soccer? Sure. Swimming? Sure. Violin? Whatever. Arts? Yeah, you got it. This is extracurricular activities for something that your child wants to explore and learn. You don't have to apply. You just submit it with your taxes at the end of the year and you get that money back. So that's really important to supporting our community development. And in terms of supporting the environment, I think that comes when we work together and discuss what the issues are and then find creative solutions to solve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And finally, Miranda, how would you maintain a commitment to balancing the interests of tourism, community, and the environment?
Thank you, Rob. And I feel so passionate about this problem because I was appointed Alberta's Parliamentary Secretary for Tourism almost a year ago now. And this is something that we have focused a lot on as a government and something that we know has to be the priority if you want to continue to develop tourism all across the province. Undeniably, here in the Bow Valley, tourism is our lifeblood. In Banff, I think it's 91% of our GDP. It is everything that we know. It is our entire economy and our entire way of life. And we need to find a way to support tourism while also ensuring that we can continue to protect our environment. And the only way to do that is to find that balance between environmental protection and economic growth. Here in the Valley, we already do that quite well, but there are so many ways that we can improve. If we look to British Columbia, one of their primary largest sources of tourism revenue is recreation. And if you see a BC license plate, it literally says beautiful British Columbia on there. And they did not get that slogan or that reputation from paving paradise and turning British Columbia into the new Disney World. They did it by supporting this regenerative tourism, by supporting recreation, hiking, biking, camping, skiing, all of the reasons that so many of us moved here to the Bow Valley. We can find ways to support that and grow those as industries that are low impact on the environment, but also support our economy. And if we look all across the province, there is potential, not just here in the mountains, but there's so much untapped potential from north to south, whether you're in the Peace Country or the Badlands or here in the Northern Rockies or the Southern Rockies by Waterton. There's so much opportunity to build and find amazing ways for people to experience the incredible outdoors of Alberta that we are so fortunate to be able to call home, while ensuring that we do so in a low impact way that supports recreation and supports our environment and supports protecting it, while also giving people a reason to get outside and create jobs in their communities. I think it's important to know too that a lot of these opportunities are in rural and remote gateway communities, and so there's such an opportunity really to preserve our environment, find a way to let other people, whether they be Albertans or other Canadians, experience our province while also ensuring that we protect it along the way.
we're going to do sort of an open 2 minutes on the subject of sustainability. If anyone wants to start, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll look for other hands to interject. Okay, Megan.
I'll just make a comment about something sustainable we used to have on the issues that I'm most concerned about. We're not idiots in Alberta. There's plenty of people that work in the oil and gas industry understand it. They've been at the regulator trying to manage it. And 25 years ago, we had a regulatory program that managed every well and collected all the money for cleanup while they were still profitable. And industry helped design the program. They agreed to it, endorsed it when it was announced, but it hasn't been enforced in 25 years. We knew how to solve the problem. We came up with the system. It's still sitting there on the books. It's just never been enforced. And that seems like an easy solution to one of the things we could implement. Hard to understand why the last couple governments sat by and watched it. It's been unused all this time, but the solution I've been promoting as the most viable one.
Miranda?
Yeah, I guess I'm realizing that during my answer, I just went on a bit of an excited rant and didn't actually say what we're doing. So I will just follow up my excitable rant by saying that some of the work we are doing to support balancing the environment and tourism is, first off, we're pursuing an integrated crown land strategy. And what that means is that if you want to run a guided hiking business, it's not going to take you 10 years to get a permit anymore. We know that we can do so much better for our entrepreneurs. We shouldn't be sending business elsewhere. We can find ways to support entrepreneurs who do an amazing job of managing our ecosystems while also giving them a way to start businesses and give other people to experience our outdoors. So we're working on this integrated crown land strategy. We've also been funding campsites at a quite rapid rate. We just funded 900 new campsites in our last budget, and because we want to make sure that when people go to the outdoors, they have a place to stay. They shouldn't need to drive 2 hours back to get home to a hotel somewhere in an urban area. And finally, I also just want to note that the permitting process, I talked about the crown land strategy, but there is so much more to this. It's not just about crown lands. It's about ensuring that entrepreneurs and trails associations can access funding. And that's why we've also, and I'm getting cut off again, but I will just say that we've also given a lot of money to trails associations and volunteer groups to support trail development in a sustainable way the past 4 years.
All right, thanks, Miranda. Question number 3 is on the subject of fiscal responsibility and leadership. The order for this one will be Sarah, Miranda, Kyle, and Reagan. So the question is, fiscal management and leadership are a key part of running an effective government. What experience do you have managing large and complex budgets that need to serve a variety of stakeholders and interests? Start with Sarah.
Okay. So what do you, like my actual personal experience? Is that what you're asking me?
Okay. Just talk about whatever.
Sure, yes, whatever I want. So personally, I have managed large budgets as the conservation director for CPAWS Southern Alberta. I was responsible for the entire conservation budget and managing the staff that came with that. That obviously doesn't compare to a budget associated with a government ministry. But what I do want to say is that, you know, the NDP, we're taking a very strategic approach to our fiscal management, and we partnered with Todd Hirsch, the former chief economist of the Alberta Treasury Branch, to write a report for us and provide some recommendations on how to manage Alberta's finances in this time of surplus. That report has provided a really nice baseline for us. We have, what the basic plan is that we'll have a basic level of funding and revenue that goes into public programs, and anything above that baseline would go into a heritage trust fund for savings, and what to do with those savings would be part of a public consultation process with Albertans and a comprehensive plan of what to do with those savings. If we don't have a plan, that surplus would go towards paying down the debt. I also just want to emphasize that we really want to prioritize putting money towards things that Albertans care about and Albertans want to prioritize, which what we're hearing at the doors is healthcare, affordability, public education. And I think that it's really important that Albertan taxpayer dollars go towards the things that Albertans want to spend their taxes on. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that and see where the questions go after.
That's good. Thanks, Sarah. Miranda, what experience experience do you have in managing large and complex budgets that need to serve a variety of stakeholders and interests?
Well, Rob, I spent most of my adult life in business and management, whether that be helping out my family business or the farm, or my management experience with Coca-Cola in their head office in Calgary. But what I want to talk about today is fiscal management, because this is a really important question, and we can no longer continue to perpetually mortgage the futures of young Albertans to pay for our selfish spending habits of the day. And it's all fun and games for the NDP to talk about being responsible fiscal managers. But the truth is, on this file specifically, our government inherited an absolute fiscal train wreck from their government. Record levels of debt and deficit spending, to the point where we were spending $5 million per day on debt servicing costs just to banks. That's money that could have gone to healthcare, that could have gone to education, that could have gone to mental health. All of the areas that we need to support, we can support when we are responsible with our money. And so we've worked very diligently the past 4 years to bring our budget back into a balanced position, and not only balanced, but a surplus. And I want to be clear that that did not happen thanks to high oil prices. The surplus perhaps did, but the balanced budget was balanced on $69 oil, which is, I will say, quite moderate for our province. We did that even through a global pandemic and a collapse in commodity prices to negative $40 a barrel. But we did that by keeping our debt to GDP ratio low, by keeping our spending trajectory down below the rate of inflation, by economic growth across every sector of our economy to support spending in other areas that were important, and again, balanced on $69 oil. We know that having strong fiscal management is important for our province if you want to continue borrowing, lending, supporting a strong economy, and we've done that the past 4 years. And to cap it all off, we finished our term and our final budget with balanced budget legislation, which means that no government ever thereafter will be able to even run a deficit in the province of Alberta without the political consequences. So I want to be clear that if there is any government that is the government and the party of fiscal management and strong financial responsibility, it is absolutely the Conservative Party.
Miranda. Kyle, what experience do you have managing large and complex budgets that need to serve a variety of stakeholders and interests?
Well, as I said before, I am just a regular citizen trying to hold our governments accountable, so I have no experience in that at all. I think Miranda said that beautifully, so I will agree with her on that.
And finally, Reagan, what experience do you have in managing large and complex budgets that need to serve a variety of stakeholders and interests?
Well, I think that's mostly a question for incumbents. I'm just a roofer, but I have worked with wide coalitions of stakeholders, landholders, academics, concerned citizens, whistleblowers from industry, to work on complex research projects in the public interest with no funding in a hostile political environment. And so I have a little bit of understanding about it. And when it comes to fiscal management, Albertans aren't idiots. We know how much money is coming out of the ground. Either we work in the industry or we have family that works in the industry, and this pretending that we're broke is a joke. There's $152 billion in excess profits the industry put in its pocket last year. Well, we didn't have a deficit, but we did okay. But the balance is way out of whack. Under the NDP, we collect 5 cents of every dollar of the oil and gas and bitumen that came out of the ground. That's crazy. And to pretend we need to be fiscally responsible with the 5 cents of every dollar instead of acting like owners for 100 cents of the dollars of the resources we own is a joke. It's playing games. The only way to be really fiscally responsible in Alberta is to act like an owner and to collect the money we deserve. It's ours. And after that, we should be responsible. We should be transparent. We should be accountable. We should set our priorities democratically. But unless we collect the money to start with, it's a joke, because we're not broke. There is enough money. We just don't get it. I don't know why the other parties aren't interested in getting it, but pretending we need to be responsible with 5 cents instead of $1 is a trick.
Thank you, Reagan. On the subject of fiscal responsibility and leadership, we'll sort of open the floor to a 2-minute conversation. Is anyone interested in starting? Sarah?
I knew that this was going to be a little back and forth, but I haven't found the UCP budgets over the last 4 years to be fiscally responsible. I really struggled with the fact that they've given billions of taxpayer dollars to large corporations and we got no jobs in return. In fact, we lost 15,000 jobs in response to some of the billions of dollars of tax credits we gave large corporations. Recently, the UCP proposed giving $20 billion to oil companies to clean up abandoned wells. I can't even tell you how angry that made me. They're already legally required to do that. If you want to talk about fiscal responsibility, I think you actually need to look at what the NDP is proposing right now, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I'm just going to let Miranda have an opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Rob. Well, I will just say that I think this is a really perfect example of the total dichotomous ideologies that are at this table today. I do not believe that allowing corporations or even individuals on their income taxes the ability to keep more of the money that was theirs to begin with to be a handout. A handout would be taking that money and giving it to someone else, but simply lowering taxes is not a government handout. And I want to be clear that when the NDP raised business taxes on corporations, they brought in $2 billion less money because business fled the province. In stark contrast, we lowered those business taxes to the lowest in Canada, and we brought in $3 billion of net more revenue to the province, as well as 220,000 new jobs, including diversified sectors like technology and lithium. In fact, Alberta is the fastest growing technology sector in all of North America today. So there's no question that jobs have been created. Yep, yeah. Go to Reagan.
What I've studied for the last 15 years is the economics of oil and gas and how little we collect. While he'd got 35 cents a dollar, we were getting 5 cents under the NDP. They had a royalty review. They lowered royalties further. Since then, we've had a UCP government. They won't dare talk about it. We're still collecting as little as we did after they lowered what were already the lowest rates on earth. Who's going to act like an owner? If we're left with these two parties, it's not even up for debate. There's no choice for Albertans to get any more than that nickel, and no way to be fiscal otherwise.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the topic of transportation and labor market stability. The order for this one will be Kyle, Miranda, Reagan, Sarah. Labor force stability matters in our community, and a robust and sustainable way of transporting people is key towards supporting that. What's your vision towards a progressive and interconnected method of transporting people to and around the Bow Valley, including Kananaskis country? Kyle.
Well, I think we've been doing a pretty good job of that actually in the past few years. That roam bus seems to be working great. Young kids working get to ride around for free. It's very cheap to ride. I would like to see it move outwards a little bit. Like I said before, Kananaskis, Dead Man's Flats, Lake Louise. I don't believe it goes to Lake Louise, I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, no, I think the roam bus is working. I just think we need to get some more rolling and maybe a little longer hours as well. Again, I believe it ends at 8 or 9 o'clock. So that makes it difficult for people working late shifts in bars and restaurants, which is a big part of the industry out here. So yeah, I think we can make a little tweaks to it, but it's been around pretty good.
Thank you, Kyle. Up next, Miranda, what is your vision towards a progressive and interconnected method of transporting people to and around the Bow Valley, including Kananaskis country?
Well, I will actually echo what Kyle said, and that we do a lot of things really well already in this Bow Valley. We have Roam Transit, which works phenomenally well, and we should be so fortunate and proud to have Roam Transit operate in our valley. It's interconnected, which a lot of other municipalities across the province would kill for. To have a transit network that could connect across 3 municipalities, or if we include Kananaskis, they're an improvement district. But it's really quite phenomenal that we've established this corporation, and it serves our valley so well. And our government has been happy to support Roam Transit at every step of the way. One of the best initiatives we've spearheaded is starting to increase the frequency and increasing the stops that Roam can go to. So just a couple years ago, we added a new couple stops to Roam Transit through their network with stops into Kananaskis country destinations. And I know there is hope to expand that all the way into Kananaskis Country Village. But right now, which is going to some of the most prominent hiking destinations. But that was one thing that we spearheaded to support an interconnected valley and ensure that tourists or residents who lived in the valley could not only go between Canmore and Banff, but also get into some of their favorite spots into Kananaskis. We also have supported Rome Transit through our affordability package that we announced under the past budget. And we recognize that Rome is already free in the Bow Valley for locals, but we did give more money to the town of Canmore as part of a package for other municipalities as well that could access funding for low-income transit. And what that did is it was able to offset the costs that the town of Canmore was already allocating towards making the transit free for residents and Banff as well. And in that sense, the town was then able to look at their budget and say, where else can we allocate our resources to support other affordability programs in the valley that are now offset by these Rome Transit funds from the province. So we absolutely support the interconnectedness of Rome Transit. I think we are so fortunate to have it, and I just hope that we are able to continue supporting that program and that service for many years to come.
Thank you, Miranda. Reagan, what's your vision towards a progressive and interconnected method of transporting people to and around the Bow Valley, including Kananaskis?
That's a great question. I think labor force sustainability is a major concern out here, and transportation is a big part of that. Not just for employment, but it would be wonderful to expand that beyond just servicing employment with tourism being able to be more car-free. And it sounds like there's the beginnings of a transit network out here that could be expanded, better funded, but it's not just transportation that is going to make the labor force sustainable. There's the major concerns about sustainability and wages. A living wage out here is something quite a bit different than other parts of the province, and that's also a big part of making our labor force sustainable so that we can have the sort of service out here that the people who live out here to serve us when we visit have a decent life, and that's going to be just as important as the transportation part, which is a big challenge with the seasons and the landscape, but I'm sure there's progress that can be made, and the Green Party is committed to those sort of principles and be happy to work with the other parties along those lines.
Thank you, Reagan. And finally, Sarah, what's your vision towards a progressive and interconnected method of transporting people to and around the Bow Valley, including Kananaskis country?
I love how this question is followed up after the fiscal management tension, and now we're all up here being like, I love public transit, because who doesn't love public transit? So obviously I love Rome, and I actually live in Canmore. I frequently take the Rome to meetings in Banff because it's so much fun, and I can play on my phone while the bus drives me here. So yes, I think Rome is great. I think there's a lot of potential to expand Rome to include our other communities in the Bow Valley, Exshaw, Deadman's Flats, Minithini. It would be really great if we could have transportation across the Bow Valley. I think that would also address some of our housing needs. We're looking at building affordable housing, but if we could build affordable housing on a valley-wide scale, then people could commute to and from the community and live somewhere else. I know it's not ideal, but it might be a potential solution for us. When I've been investigating this idea of riding wide regional public transportation since I became the candidate. I'm very intrigued by this, and a wise woman told me, public transportation is not something that you make money on. It is an investment in your community. And when I think about public transportation here in the Bow Valley, that's what I think about. It's not something that we can expect to be profitable. It is an investment in our communities, connecting our communities to each other, allowing our children to have friends in Banff and actually take the bus instead of me having to drive to see them. That would be so amazing. Or even in Exshaw. So I think this idea of connecting our communities, it's about time. And it actually only creates a stronger Bow Valley, both in terms of community identity, but also economic success. Thank you.
On the subject of transportation and labor market stability, we can have an up to 2-minute conversation if you guys would like to elaborate or add anything. Does anyone have anything they would like to start with here? We don't have to. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the question of tourism and economy. So this one's going to start with Miranda, then we'll go to Sarah, Reagan, and Kyle. So you are seeking a job in one of the most politically complex ridings in the province, where you have to balance many interests at one time. How will you ensure the sustainability of our economy, one that is driven by tourism, to ensure this is prioritized? Miranda.
Thank you, Rob. And this is a really great question because, as I mentioned earlier, out here in the Bow Valley, tourism is pretty much everything to us. Like I said, in Banff, I think it's either 89 or 91% of our GDP, which means that pretty much everyone works in tourism. And that I don't just mean the people who work at the gondola or who work in restaurants or hotels or places that we ordinarily think of being a tourism business. I mean everyone who cuts hair, people who do nails, people who may work as a janitor. Everyone in our community in the Bow Valley contributes and plays an active role in our tourism economy. And it is so incredibly important that we support every single person living in this valley and tourism as a whole. Once our Premier, now Danielle Smith, came into office, she appointed me to be Alberta's Parliamentary Secretary for Tourism because she recognized that tourism needed to have a vital voice at the decision-making table in our province. For too long, I think many operators in this room would agree that tourism was this amazing industry that we just wanted the world to see and to understand, and it never quite had the platform at the provincial decision-making table that it deserved, despite its many contributions to the provincial economy. So in partnership with Premier Smith and my Minister Todd Lowen, we worked really hard to spearhead the cause of tourism. I've personally worked very hard to ensure that tourism has that voice at the table and to make sure that tourism can play a leading role in Alberta's economic future, not just a passive role any longer, but a leading role. We have supported that financially. We've tripled the funding to Travel Alberta, which of course comes from the overnight tourism levy that we pay on our hotels when we stay in them. We have transformed Travel Alberta's mandate to no longer include just destination promotion, but destination management, which really means that they have the ability to now develop destinations and invest in entrepreneurial ventures or develop places that may be new and exciting to build attractions and diversify our tourism offerings to the many visitors that come here. Like I said earlier, we've talked about our Crown Land strategy, expanding access to the outdoors, but really through it all, we just believe in a firm mantra in our government, and myself very personally, that tourism is an amazing industry. We want to support it, not just here in the Bow Valley, but all across the province.
Thank you, Miranda. Up next, Sarah. How would you ensure the sustainability of our economy, one that is driven by tourism, to ensure this is prioritized?
Well, tourism is the foundation of our economy here in the Bow Valley. Most of our businesses, as my colleague has said, are involved in tourism. It is the heart of who we are and what we do here. So one of the ways that we're going to help make that more sustainable is that we are going to eliminate the small business tax. This will save small businesses thousands of dollars each year, and the majority of our businesses here in the Bow Valley are small. So these are going to help, the mom and pop shops, your bike shop who tunes your bike up every year, or where you get coffee. So this small business tax elimination hopefully will create some space for businesses to maybe hire more staff, or whatever their priorities are. The other part that I want to say that's important to this is this affordable housing component. It's very difficult for businesses to recruit and retain staff if those staff don't have somewhere to live. So affordable housing is a huge priority for us, not only to attract nurses and teachers who also don't have anywhere to live when they move here, but also to attract and retain some of our hospitality or tourism related staff, and hopefully help them plant roots in our community so that they stay here and become the next generation of Banffites or Canmorites, and contribute to our economy over the long term.
Up next, Reagan. How would you ensure the sustainability of our economy, one that is driven by tourism, to ensure this is prioritized?
It's a tough question. You can tell from the other candidates' answers. We all like tourism. We know it's important. We'd like to support it and nourish it. Not too sure how, but I'd suggest we're going to be tested soon. There's a recession coming, And that's when our priority, other than just supporting it, other than just giving tax breaks that are going to leave us with a budget shortfall in the next recession, how are we going to defend and support the tourism industry when things go south soon, when the numbers go down? In the next recession, when they're struggling, what sort of supports are going to be offered? The prices have already been rising. Affordability is already a crisis. What happens when the tourists stop coming? There's going to be another recession. And I think the main thing that supporting tourism means is when it's challenged in this next recession, how are we going to keep the wonderful things you guys have built? How are you going to maintain it through the recession so it's there to take advantage when things turn around? That's probably the next challenge we'll be facing out here, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but the austerity we've had from the last couple of governments and the promises of more tax cuts are only ensuring we're not going to have the money to address those problems unless we think like owners.
Thank you, Reagan. And finally, Kyle, how would you ensure the sustainability of our economy, one that is driven by tourism, to ensure this is prioritized?
Well, obviously, yes, tourism is what drives this Bull Valley for sure. I think I'd like to see, on a personal level, the prices of everything driven more towards the tourists. I don't see why local businesses can't give a local discount to support your neighbors living in the valley and everyone dealing with the same issues. Paid parking downtown. Right now, if you live in Dead Man's Flats, you have to pay to park in Canmore. I mean, I'm a local businessman who drives around all day and parks all day. And it's just a little bit ridiculous to be siphoning more money out of my pocket to pay for parking around town. But yeah, overall, I would say make it more affordable for the people living here and put the charges on the tourists.
Thank you, Kyle. On the subject of tourism and economy, we can have up to 2 minutes of open discussion if anyone would like to add or follow up with anything that has been said here already. Sarah?
Sorry, I have something to add.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to emphasize that we are going to be allocating $7 million for Indigenous small business and local agriculture tourism. We have a lot of small business, and obviously we have 2 First Nations in our riding who can directly benefit from that funding. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that tourism is a complex system. And so, you know, we can't just throw money at the problem. It takes strategy and long-term planning, and it really takes working collaboratively with municipalities, with the MD, with stakeholders, and with user groups to really define what do we want tourism to look like, how do we create a system for our businesses to thrive, and how do we make sure that visitors, you know, have a high quality experience when they get here.
If there's nothing else, then we'll move on to our final structured question. Following this one, we will get to questions from the audience, so be prepared for that. If you've got something, you can be prepared to line up the microphone there or submit it on a piece of paper. So our final structured question is on the subject of healthcare, this one specifically being framed around mental health. How would you improve the state of mental health support? Sorry, I'll say it's for Reagan, Kyle, Sarah, and then Miranda. How do you improve the state of mental health supports for our unique communities, which often host new employees who come from other places to work with us and may not understand how to navigate our provincial healthcare system? What changes or improvements would you make specifically in Banff and Lake Louise? Reagan.
Thanks. For the Green Party, public health care is a right, and some of the unique challenges you have in Banff with those sorts of challenges should certainly be part of universal health care, and these local conditions should be adapted to and addressed so that not just citizens but everyone here to help make this complex system work is properly taken care of. And so it's nice to be running for the Green Party, who's committed to not just publicly funded health care, but expanding it to include mental health, vision, hearing, dental, pharma care. And those are things that we could afford if we acted like owners, collected as much as law heed. And so mental health is a big challenge that isn't addressed. There's others, but that's one that's going to be increasingly important going into a recession. Those pressures are only going to increase, and the government should be addressing them, not just exasperating them. And so the Green Party wants to expand the public funding of it without privatizing it, and for it to include that mental health, and to also be able to adapt to conditions like you have here in Banff, so that we can take care of everybody.
All right, Kyle, how would you improve the state of mental health supports for our unique communities? What changes or improvements would you make specifically in Banff and Lake Louise?
For what I know about mental health, I mean, it's obviously gotten worse in the past several years. It doesn't seem to be too accessible, in my opinion. I've personally tried myself to get my son in, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. For me personally, I had to get permission from my ex-partner to put my kid into healthcare, and she and me did not get along, so that was obviously difficult. So I think mental health should definitely be taken very seriously. I think it should be offered at schools so we can keep our children taken care of, and offered a little more easy access for everybody. But then again, that would take having more doctors in place to be able to handle that need.
Thank you, Kyle. Sarah, how would you improve the state of mental health supports for our unique communities? What changes or improvements would you make specifically in Banff and Lake Louise?
So mental health is a significant challenge for our communities, and I'll just say that everybody in my family sees a counselor. We really, really believe in mental health in our family, for sure. I think I would be a different person without mine. One of the things I'm most excited about in the NDP platform is this idea of family health teams. So this is a really great way that we can proactively treat people with all kinds of illnesses, not just mental health, before they're too sick and end up in the hospital. So these family health teams will be working with local health professionals, doctors and nurses, to first understand what the community gaps are in terms of health professionals. I think mental health always rises to the top right now in this conversation. And then creating interdisciplinary medical clinics where you have doctors, nurse practitioners, mental health professionals, throw in a couple physios, because can you ever have enough physios in the Bow Valley? And that it basically turns into a one-stop shop for your medical needs. So it prevents people from getting too sick and needing to go to the hospital. We've committed to building 10 brand new family health teams clinics around Alberta, and one of those clinics will be coming here to the Bow Valley. So this is a direct way that our medical capacity here in the Bow Valley will be improved. We've also really committed to implementing the largest healthcare staff recruitment strategy the province has seen, to bring doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners back to the province. We'll also be working with post-secondary institutions to ensure that people who do graduate from a medical program at an Alberta post-secondary institution are incentivized to stay here and work here and be part of the Alberta Comprehensive Health Team.
And finally, Miranda, how would you improve the state of mental health supports for our unique communities, and what changes or improvements would you make specifically in Banff and Lake Louise?
Well, I will first respond to Sarah's question about we can never have enough physios, and I'm a testament to that, because I once walked into the Banff Sport Medicine Clinic for a pre-operative consultation on my right shoulder with my left arm in a cast, which is perhaps a testament to the importance of having enough physio and respective surgeons and support staff in the Bow Valley. But specifically about mental health, on a much more serious and somber note, we are seeing rapid levels and increases of mental health, people struggling, especially post-pandemic, really across every age group, whether you may be elderly and you've been in a care home isolated for so long, perhaps you are a school-age child and you haven't seen your friends in a while and you live behind a computer screen. There are a lot of people who developed very unique challenges the past couple years, and we've been there by their side trying to help them every step of the way. We've increased funding and supports for mental health, I believe by almost 200% in our last budget, just recognizing how significantly the gaps and the needs that were emerging after the past couple of years were. Those supports went to adults. There were major supports that went to elementary and middle schools, recognizing that children often bore one of the largest brunts of the mental health crisis that was emerging during the pandemic. But one other piece of the mental health puzzle that I don't think we've discussed tonight is addictions, and all the challenges that come with those who either developed addictions over the past couple of years or had one that was longer standing. Our government has done, if there's one area that Danielle Smith has really championed, it has been access to treatment. Our government has a huge belief that recovery is absolutely possible, and we have done all that we can to support addictions treatment and support addictions recovery. For the first time in Alberta history, we actually dropped all user fees to access public addictions treatment beds, recognizing that everyone should have equal access. We created 8,000 new treatment beds after dropping those fees, and we've also begun to create recovery-oriented communities of care all across the province to ensure that those who are struggling with mental health or addictions can check themselves into a recovery community and get the help that they need.
So we'll open the floor for a 2-minute conversation about mental health, healthcare, if anyone would like to add anything. Kyle?
Also, mental health seems to be, there's an uproar in it lately, but no one seems to talk about the importance of fitness and being active and eating healthy and taking care of your body. I've listened to several people talk actually who are on the antidepressants, and you get so addicted trying to get off them that your body suffers for several months trying to get off them. So I would say, yeah, if we could push people, incentivize people to get out and exercise and eat healthy and take care of yourself, I think we would see a lot less problems with mental health.
Okay, we are going to move on to questions from the floor. So again, we have 2 microphones, one on either side of the room. So here's how this is going to work. I would like you to direct the questions to me, and at first identify yourself as well, and then let me know which of the candidates you are directing your questions to. You can direct them to up to 2 specific candidates if you'd like. If you don't direct it to anyone in particular, I'll pick 2 candidates and try to just keep it very even here. Also, out of respect for the questions of others, I would like you to ask a question, not looking for statements or stories or big preambles. If I don't hear a question within the first sentence or 2, I'll probably just ask you to get to a question. And then we will give the candidates up to 90 seconds to answer those questions. So we're going to start on the microphone that's farthest away from me. If you could just introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is James. My question is for Sarah and for Miranda, and it's a good segue. Can you, or through you, can you state your party's policies on safe injection sites and safe supply, and if elected, how you support those policies here in this constituency?
Great. So I believe Sarah will go first here.
Thanks, James. That's a really great question. So the NDP really values all Albertans, and you know, the opioid crisis is a tragedy that we're facing, and every loss is one that I feel, and our communities feel deeply. The NDP wants to take a comprehensive approach with a range of treatment options for people with addiction that spans everything from treatment beds, like my colleague was discussing, through to housing, and through to mental health counseling and addictions counseling. We are proposing integrated teams of police, social workers, mental health professionals, and addictions counselors to be working in our communities. So these would be interdisciplinary teams of professionals helping people identify what they need to recover their addiction and start building a life. So we really wanted to create a model that was really flexible to address people's needs. If that requires safe injection sites, that requires safe injection sites. But I think the idea is that we create a model that is flexible, that can suit whatever people's needs are.
Thank you, Sarah. Miranda, if you'd like to answer that question as well.
Sure. I will just reiterate, I suppose, some of what I've already said, is that at the foundation of our government's approach to addictions policy has been a foundational belief that recovery is possible. And in so many other jurisdictions around the world, whether that be some of the worst, I guess I would say, are British Columbia or California, we see policy that really promotes this idea that addiction is not possible and that we should keep people down in their addictions, let them struggle and just support them in the life that they've chosen. But the reality is that the vast majority of people, if they had the opportunity to get clean, would love to get clean. And we do believe that humans and all Albertans are able and capable people of getting clean if we are able to provide them with the resources and the avenues to do that. And that's why we have supported recovery so heavily the past 3 years. It's why we've dropped user fees to access public treatment. It's why we budgeted for 4,000 new beds and ended up creating 8,000 just last year alone, because we recognize that addictions treatment is so critical, especially as we emerge from the pandemic. And we really believe that recovery is possible. And we want to do everything that we possibly can as a government to ensure that we help every single Albertan who is battling an addiction to get through that addiction and see life through to the other side.
Thank you, Miranda. All right, so again, just a reminder, if you would prefer to write in your question anonymously, you can do so. Just raise your piece of paper high in the air, and Wanda's in the back there, and she'll watch for you and collect it. We'll add it to the bucket. And I will be drawing from the bucket here throughout the rest of the next half hour or so here. Sorry, Kyle, you don't mind passing the water down as I'll get to your question there. Sorry, what's your name?
Okay. My name is Paul, and I lived in the valley for 30 plus years, being a local. And the question is very different than you're thinking. It's for Sarah and Miranda both. You got a dead heat going into the race course. Both parties get 46 vote. You got a minority government. What you going to change in future to get a majority government? Because the way it looks right now, neither of the party holds the power.
So the question is, what would you change to get a majority government? If you're in a minority situation?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do Miranda and Reagan for this one. So Miranda, do you want to start?
Sure. I think one of the most important things we can do is to continue to listen to Albertans and ensure that every single one of our MLAs is listening to the needs of their community and advocating on their behalf to the provincial level to make sure that we can be the best, most responsive, most collaborative provincial government that has ever been had, whether that be the NDP or the United Conservatives. But if we do find ourselves into this position where we are, a 1 or 2 seat differential and we find ourselves in a near minority position, I think one of the most important things that we can do as both parties is find ways to work together. The past, I think all across North America, we're starting to see this dichotomy emerge and this polarization emerge between parties and governments. And it doesn't need to be that way. In fact, a couple years ago, I got pulled from the lottery raffle. And if you don't know how private members' business works, if you're not a minister, you can only put forward a motion if you get pulled from the hat by the speaker in a lucky order. So we all cross our fingers every session. But I actually got pulled from the hat in lucky order. I think it was numbered 5. And I got the opportunity to put forward a motion. And the motion I put forward was probably not what people expected, but I called on both sides of the House, as we would say, or the government, to work together more and to strike a committee and study other parliaments across our system and all across the world to find ways that we could collaborate together more, listen, work together, and find ways to advance the priorities of Albertans in every corner of the province, recognizing that every one of us every riding doesn't have bipartisan representation by the nature of how our system is set up. So absolutely, if to get to a majority, governments need to respond and listen. But I think in the meantime, we need to also be able to work together.
Reagan, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, if Sarah would like to go, I think, Paul, you directed it towards these two. I'm happy to tack on after, but if Sarah would like to respond for Paul.
surprisingly, I echo kind of what my colleague said. I think when we have a large opposition in the legislature, the idea of working together is critical. We're all sitting in that chair because we were elected by the people to represent the people. And so as MLA, I think my number one responsibility is to represent the voice of the constituents who elected me and those who didn't elect me. Like, you're an MLA, you represent everybody in your riding. Working with the other parties in the House is absolutely important to governing successfully. And Reagan, I'll just turn it to you because I don't want to talk.
And I'll agree with Miranda as well. I think that we should listen to Albertans. And there's a consensus amongst Albertans for higher royalties. So we can afford whatever type of government you have, it will be enabled by acting like an owner. And whatever the party, Albertans support higher royalties. The opinion polls always say so. We're not idiots. But nobody wants to talk about it, so there hasn't been a public opinion poll about royalties since 2010. I can assure you the parties have done dozens of private ones, but they don't tell you what they say, because the last one said 88% of Albertans wanted higher royalties. And that's what a minority government would look like. That's how it would represent the interests of more than a minority. They're polling at 30%. That's not majority territory. We should be having this conversation about what a democratic government would look like in Alberta that represented a majority of folks, whether they've decided or not.
Perfect. We'll go to that side of the room. If you could introduce your name there.
Sure. My name is Meghraj, and I migrated to the Valley 2008, so I've been local and...
Sorry, if you don't mind just talking a little closer to the microphone there, that'd be awesome.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. So my name is Meghraj. I migrated to the Valley in 2008, and I did my PR with the process. I felt really good. I thought I was migrating to a great country in the world. Then I did my citizen and I paid my taxes. I felt great again. When COVID happened, there was a mental health issue in my family, and I tried everything in the world. Nothing worked. Finally, I called my MLA's office multiple times. It sent me to Canmore, to other office to Canmore. Didn't go anywhere. I never heard back.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Can I tell, then I can ask the question? Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So can I speak what I am here for? Can I say what I am here for?
I mean, we're looking for a question.
Yes, it will follow up with the question.
Yeah, okay.
Without understanding the context, how do I ask question?
Okay.
So do you want me to start up?
Go ahead.
Okay. So then I started sending emails, and I have emails. May 24th, I sent email to Miranda. September 21st, I sent email. Finally, I had to reach to health minister. I got response from the minister office, but not your office. So my question is, when I am as a local citizen trying to find somebody who can raise my voice, who I can get the leadership from, I heard nothing after all my effort. When a minister can respond, my MLA didn't respond. So I want to ask Miranda, you can speak all you want. I feel like I have no representation. How would you make that better? Either I vote for you or not. I need that representation. I feel everybody wants to know if once you elected, you go silent. Like, how would you represent?
I think we get the idea of your question.
Yeah.
Miranda?
Yeah, well, firstly say, I will apologize on two matters. I will apologize first off for the matter that yourself and your family went through during or coming out of the pandemic, but I will also apologize profusely that you did not receive a response or even an adequate response from my office. I will say, I think that it's an abnormal circumstance. I will honestly look into it. If I can receive your name, perhaps in writing after this forum, I will go back to my office because while I'm not really the MLA anymore, we do still have someone staffing that office because the government still must continue. So I'm happy to go back and look into your file and see where it got dropped. I do know, our little office has one lady, and she's probably underpaid, and she works like 60 hours a week, and she's received, I think, over 150,000 emails. She's tried her absolute best to respond to most of them the past few years, but I understand that files slip through the cracks, and sometimes some of the most important, challenging ones slip through the cracks, which it sounds happened to yourself. I will say that I'm grateful the health minister got back to you, and I do hope that he was able to provide support or direct you to where you may have needed to be directed. But like I said, I'm very sorry you did not receive that response from my office. And if you want to connect after the forum, I'm happy to take your name down and just do a quick search of our inbox and our files and see where that file got lost and what happened and why you didn't receive that response.
We'll move on to this side of the room here.
Good evening. My name is Marv. I have been in Alberta since 1978 when I moved here as a young man. And through the moderator here, my big picture question. I appreciate all of the fine points back and forth, but this is a major election. It's really important that we deal with a big picture. So this is for Sarah and Miranda. And so Sarah representing the NDP and Rachel Notley. Miranda, of course, Premier Danielle. Now, this was a great free province built by Conservatives. And the big picture history of this province, that's how it was built. Now, my question is, the NDP party in Alberta is, as I understand, connected with the NDP in Ottawa, who work hand in hand with young Prime Minister Trudeau. Now, here's the question, all right? So how will we divorce that accountability to young Trudeau over there, whose father, when I moved here, hold it a second here, this is important. I'm given a question, how will we divorce ourselves from that accountability to Ottawa? That's the question. Now, remember, when the National Energy Policy came in, it destroyed us. It destroyed Alberta. So, what we're looking for, and how will Miranda and her party bring in free Alberta again? That's my questions to both of them.
Sarah?
Okay, thanks for the question.
You're welcome.
It's a good one. So I've lived in Alberta my whole life, so I hear you. I know all about this sentiment. I first have a point of clarification. The NDP party provincially is not connected to the NDP party federally.
103.1.
Okay, you can believe what you want. The federal and the provincial political systems are designed to be separate from each other. So if you think that the federal NDP and the provincial NDP are connected, then well, I'm sorry, but that's just inaccurate. We're not. Rachel Notley has, when we were in government, negotiated quite heavily with Justin Trudeau in the interest of Albertans to get a pipeline to Tidewater in the Trans Mountain. That was not an easy negotiation. That was difficult, and that Trans Mountain pipeline is going to open in November. She's the first premier in 50 years to actually get a pipeline to Tidewater, and that involved quite strenuous negotiations with the federal government. So Rachel Notley and the NDP are putting Albertans and Alberta families first, period.
Yeah, so I guess on the NDP bit, before I get into making Alberta a strong and free place to call home, I will say that it's either section 1.01 or 0.02 of the NDP Constitution quite literally reads, the Alberta NDP shall constitute a section of the New Democratic Party of Canada. I don't think it can be much more clear than in the first or second line of that founding document. But nonetheless, I think the question more broadly was not about the intricacies of our party's founding constitutions on either side. I think it was more broadly about the way of life that we know and love as Albertans. And I, like many, perhaps some in this room, grew up in Saskatchewan, but very similar values to Albertans. I grew up a farm girl. I know what it's like to work hard and roll up your sleeves, and so many of us feel that same way. Alberta is a place made of entrepreneurs and people who work hard and maintain this self-determinant spirit that you really don't find very other places services like you do here. And I think that the best way and the most important thing governments can do to restore and to maintain that spirit of Alberta that I think so many of us would call it, is to ensure that Albertans have the ability to operate and live their lives as they choose to do. Whether that means lowering their taxes and allowing them the ability to spend their money that they've earned the way that they want to. Whether that means giving them the freedom to work and play where they want and how they want. Really, at the end of the day, our government knows that we need to support Albertans and give Albertans the latitude to live and support themselves and the lifestyles that they want. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do, is get the government out of the way.
I'm just going to pull from the bucket here because we do have some submitted questions. And I'm going to direct this one to Kyle and then to Sarah. And this one has to do with the visitor-adjusted population. In many days, Banff's visitor-adjusted population well exceeds that of its resident population, which presents ongoing challenges in terms of having sufficient capital and operational supports to meet the future needs of our community. I mean, how well do you understand this issue, and how specifically are you prepared to advance solutions if elected on May 29th?
Yeah, I imagine the amount of people that come into this town cause a lot of problems in town, but I can't speak from any position of knowing exactly what the issue is in Banff, so I can't answer that at this time.
Sarah?
Yeah, so definitely increased visitors, especially on weekends, long weekends, and every single day in July that's over 20 degrees, puts a lot of strain on our communities, and we all adjust our lives accordingly. Like, people in Banff only walk down the back alleys, and in Canmore you don't drive downtown, you for sure don't drive down Main Street. Well, it's closed to cars now, but even before. So I think there's a couple of things here. First is that we need a strong champion in Edmonton who understands how this volume of visitation puts strain on our communities, our infrastructure, and our community identity. And I think that that's really important, communicating that we're happy to welcome millions of tourists every year and all of the economic benefit that that brings and the business supports that that brings. But it's important that at the provincial level, they understand that comes at a cost to our communities. I also, this idea of resort municipality status, tourism-based economies, is a conversation that has been happening since I came to the Bow Valley 16 years ago. I'd really like to close the loop on that. And right now, there is a piece of legislation that we could close the loop on in legislature to get a tourism-based economy designation for Canmore, Banff, and Jasper, which would enable our communities to apply for funding for infrastructure improvements. So the first step is getting that change in legislation. The next is getting the funding in place to support infrastructure.
I'll go to the far back from there.
Yeah, good evening. My name is John Williams. First of all, thank you to everybody who's actually putting their butt on the line here. I know it takes a lot, and to serve in public office is not an easy job. So I want you to let you know I appreciate all of you, and we're in a tight race, and we've got two big things here. We've got one that is a capitalistic party and one that is a democratic socialist party. But what really concerns me in this whole election is everybody in here is an Albertan first. We can all go have a beer and we can have a few laughs, but when we're behind our screens, we're always fighting back and forth. And the problem right now is we're lowering ourselves to the lowest common denominator like the US. We have this rift. Truth and ethics is a huge issue. The lies being perpetuated are irresponsible.
I'm sorry, can you get to a question?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Healthcare will never be chargeable. It's illegal. So I want to know from each candidate, and I'd like to ask all four candidates on their opinions, in particular Sarah and Miranda. What are we going to do to manage the lies and the misinformation that people are believing? It's irresponsible, and it only creates a bigger rift for our society. We want what's best for this province, every one of us.
Right. Sarah and then Miranda.
I guess the easy answer is to just be truthful and to use the best available information we have to inform our decision making. I want to be honest and truthful. I'm sharing information that I understand to be true. I have never lied. Well, I lied to my daughter once when I told her that her room was clean, and it really wasn't. So I think the essence is being honest and truthful and having integrity, obviously. But I also think it comes down to being able to work together. I grew up in a family where my dad was a staunch conservative, my mom was staunch NDP. My whole entire life has been having this debate. And then walking away from that debate with love in your heart. There's no doubt that I loved both of my parents equally most of the time, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. Having that diversity, celebrating that political diversity in Alberta, it's part of who we are. Of course we can have a beer after because we're Albertan. We can definitely collaborate and work together for the best of the province all the time.
Miranda, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I will, interestingly, I think this is a really important question for this election, because I would agree with Sarah in the sense that the most important thing we can do as elected officials is be truthful with those that we are running to represent. So on that note, I would then call on the NDP to be truthful and stop the lies. We are not privatizing healthcare under any circumstance. We are not going to make you pay for a doctor under any circumstance. We are not taking away your CPP under any circumstance. We are not blowing the tops off mountains to mine coal under any circumstance. I believe the last literature piece I saw from the NDP was black with 5 bullet points of what everything that was up we're going to do, and none of the 5 points were truthful. So I would actually just call on the NDP. If truth is the foundation of what we want to run this campaign on, I would then call on them to run on truths and not run on lies, because right now those are 4 perfect examples of things that are not true, things that we have never said. Perhaps things that we have never said, never committed to. The only person that's committed to them on our behalf has been the NDP this campaign. So if we want to speak the truth and we want to talk about the importance of being truthful with our electorate, that's the truth, those are the facts, and I would certainly call on every elected official across the province to be honest with the people that they're trying to represent.
Miranda, we'll move to this microphone over here.
Hi there. I have a question for Sarah Elmaligi and Miranda Rosen.
Sorry, what's her name?
Hillary.
Hi, Hillary.
Born and raised Banff-ite. And yeah, woohoo. I would like to ask about resort municipality status. Do you support it? What are the real steps to get us there? And what kind of timeline would you commit to?
So we'll start with Miranda, because we'll start with Sarah. Last question.
Well, my response will be, heck yes, I absolutely support it. And that's why, after it was mentioned, you know, most of us have heard this conversation circulating for the better part of 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 decades. But I am happy to say that after those 3 decades, I was the one that put forward that bill. Sarah's right, there is a piece of legislation that we can put forward, and that's because I'm the one that drafted it. I wrote it, I worked, collaborated with most of the tourism stakeholders in our community, those in Jasper, those all across the province, to draft a piece of legislation that we could finally get across the finish line and say, this is the way that we can support our communities and ensure that those communities that welcome millions of tourists a year, you know, in a hard ratio to the number of residents that they have paying their municipal taxes every year, to support them with the infrastructure that their communities need to thrive and to continue supporting tourism. And that bill, of course, was introduced not long before the session ended, which is sad. I will clarify, I kind of explained this before, but how the private members bill system works in our Westminster system is that unless you're a cabinet minister, the only way to put forward a bill is if the speaker pulls you out of a hat in an order of 87. And I got lucky, I was Bill 208, and I used that one opportunity to put forward the resort municipality status bill. And I want to reinforce how important I think this is and how reflective my decision to put forward this bill was, because I have colleagues who've been MLAs for 3 terms and never gotten the opportunity to put forward a bill. It is very rare, and so I just want to be clear that I support this concept, and if I'm re-elected, hopefully I'll get the opportunity to reintroduce it, and I will continue to advocate for our communities and their infrastructure needs.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I think this is something that Ms. Rosen and I agree on. Tourism-based economies or resort municipality status, whatever you want to call it. It is my full intention, if I become MLA, to, you know, pick up this piece of legislation that's been drafted and bring it to the legislature as soon as I can. The legislation defines Canmore, Banff, and Jasper as tourism-based economies, which opens up a funding stream for infrastructure supports that amount of funding has yet to be determined. So it's definitely a stepwise process. The first step is getting this piece of legislation passed. The next step is advocating for funding. And the third step would be working with the towns of Canmore and Banff to apply for that funding for infrastructure supports. It starts with infrastructure supports, but I could definitely see over the long term thinking about other pieces that we might need extra supports for with a large volume of tourists coming here. So yeah, I want to do it as soon as I can.
I'm going to draw another question from the hat. We're going to direct this one to Reagan and then to Sarah. This one has to do with Indigenous tourism and the economy. Alberta is leading the country in terms of its commitment to funding Indigenous-led businesses. If elected, what role or focus would you bring to Indigenous tourism development? Reagan?
That's a great question. It's not one that I could answer, but it's one that we would collaborate with First Nations and find the answers, the opportunities that present themselves. The work that I've done with First Nations has centered around oil and gas issues and managing those, and those are a big concern for First Nations communities, something they would very much like to be involved in under the federal aid. A lot was directed towards First Nations for their businesses to support that work. I'd like to continue and expand that sort of work to not only expand their businesses, but expand their territory and restore it for other and better uses. But it's something to explore with the local communities with the First Nations community here about the opportunities and what could be built on. But it is something well worth pursuing.
So I often say, and I really do feel that we are one of the luckiest ridings in the province because we have two amazing First Nations within our boundaries. The Stoney Nakoda and the Tsuut'ina, both very rich cultures that have a lot to offer in so many ways, The NDP is committed to implementing a $7 million Indigenous small business and local agriculture tourism fund that would directly support Indigenous tourism businesses to explore and deliver whatever tourism product they like. But I'll also just emphasize that whenever we start talking about Indigenous relations and Indigenous businesses, it's my objective to ask more questions than provide answers. So I am interested in supporting our Indigenous communities to do whatever it is they want to do and to provide whatever supports I can to meet the needs that they define. I don't want to approach working with Indigenous groups and say, here's all the great things I'm going to give you. I would rather hear, what do you need and how can I help you get there?
Thank you, Rob. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
This is a great evening, and I like to see the respect that's being shared and shown. Anyway, a question through you, Rob, to Sarah. I've kind of got it's really three questions, but they all interconnected. So I guess my first question, Sarah, is you talked about eliminating taxes for small businesses. I'd like you to define a small business. But you also said you're going to increase, NDP are saying they're increasing corporate taxes to 12%. So I'd like to see that distinction between what's a small business and what's a corporation that's going to be faced with 12%. And then the third part of that is the NDP concerned about increasing corporate taxes to 12% and the chasing away of investment in corporations from the province, which is what happened when they were elected 8 years ago? Thank you.
Okay, I kind of feel like I'm in the hot seat here, but I'll do my best to answer your questions. Okay, so yes, we are going to eliminate the small business tax. Unfortunately, I do not have on me what the definition is of small business. I can look that up and email that to you or get it to you another time. I apologize. That announcement just came out today, so I still feel like I'm trying to catch up a little bit. Even with our corporate tax increase, we are still offering the lowest corporate tax rates in the country. We're still the cheapest place in the country to do business, regardless of how big your business is. And so the increased taxes that we receive from that corporate tax increase is projected to create a $3.3 billion surplus in the 3 years. We did a cost analysis on our programs and our platform and the budget associated with that, and we're projecting a $3.3 billion surplus. A big part of that is that increase in the corporate tax rate, which, as I said, is still the lowest in the country.
And to, I guess, on a similar vein, we've got a written question here that's directed to Miranda. Excuse me. The UCP's platform wants to lower income taxes, but those funds pay for public services like healthcare, education, and forest fire prevention. Where will the money come to supplement these loss of funds?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you're absolutely correct. I'm not sure who submitted the question, but we have committed to lower income taxes this election. We know that one of the best ways, as I've said a few times tonight, to support Albertans who are battling an affordability crisis is to allow them to keep more of the money that they've worked so hard to earn in their own pockets to do it as they need to do. Similarly, we've also lowered the corporate tax rate the past 4 years to the lowest in Canada, fourth lowest in North America, and that's at 8% now. And interestingly, what we have not seen by lowering taxes is a bottoming out of the government's revenues. Instead, we've actually seen an increase in revenues. By lowering income taxes, we've seen an increase in income taxes or revenue because more people are going back to work. And by lowering business taxes as well, we saw a $3 billion increase in business revenues that came into the province because so much business flooded into the province as corporations and industries and new emerging sectors wanted to do business in Alberta. So we absolutely believe that the best way that we can support growing Alberta's economy is to put more people to work and broaden our tax base rather than to gouge the few people that we may be able to keep around working if we bankrupt them along the way. So we don't believe that lowering taxes will have an adverse effect on the government's revenues. In fact, we actually believe it will do the opposite because it's been proven to do so in the past. And if I can take a quick second just to address the corporate question, I know it wasn't for myself. There is an official legal definition of what is registered as a small business and what is not. But I do know the Business Council of Alberta came out today and said that in Alberta, 4 out of 5 medium to small size businesses pay the corporate tax revenue and not the small. Eliminating the small business tax is a great initiative, but it does not cover everyone.
All right, Doug, go ahead.
Hi, Rob. It's Doug McNamara here, 30 years in Banff. With apologies to Kyle and Reagan, I'm going to direct my question to Sarah and Miranda. Following on the last question, actually, and you see this room and myself, there's a lot of people moving towards or already in retirement. I know my capacity to pay more taxes is not that great, actually, and we also know that over 50% of households in this province have more debt and less income than pre-COVID. My question is, what are you going to stop doing in order to do some of the other things that we've been talking about here tonight, such as mental health and more health care and sustainability and things like that? What do we stop doing so we can move the money to some of the other priority areas?
Let's start with Miranda on that one.
Okay, well, I think this goes back to the question of fiscal responsibility. And the number one thing that we can stop doing is overspending, ironically, because when we are spending millions of dollars every single day to debt servicing, that is money that's basically just being blown into the air. You might as well take a leaf blower to it and blow it out, into the winds of the national park. So the most important thing that we can do is get our deficit eliminated, which we have now thankfully done, and then start to pay down our long-term debt as well and get that to an eliminated state. Because once we are able to spend no money on debt servicing and then we will have the money to invest in the services that Albertans need, whether that be healthcare, whether that be education, whether that be mental health. I do want to say that despite, there have been cutbacks the past few years in certain areas, but I do want to be clear that throughout our era of fiscal responsibility and prudence and reining in spending, we were careful to continue increasing the budgets to those areas that were the most important. Healthcare has gotten a $3 billion increase, education's been increased every single year, every school division's gotten an increase with their new funding formula. Same mental health, same with addictions. So we have been able to prioritize where funding needs to go to make sure that it's targeting the social programs and supports and areas that Albertans use and need the most. But if we look broader at the other areas that the government may fund, I think the most important thing we can do is stop paying money to banks and bondholders and start to support the real needs of Albertans through responsibility.
And Sarah.
I like how you phrased and framed that question. It's very intriguing. What can we stop doing? So I think what we can stop doing is allowing the global oil and gas prices to dictate our economic health. And we are very much beholden to this boom-bust economic cycle based on something that we have no control over. And economic diversification is an essential part of that for the NDP and for me. And so investing in advanced technology, digital media, film, value-added agriculture, other parts of the economy that renewable energy also, like diversifying the energy sector itself. All of those things kind of help cushion out that intense roller coaster of the boom-bust. And so I think by diversifying our economy and attracting private sector investment, focusing, we have an Alberta's Future Tax Credit and an Innovation Tax Credit, these are not new tax credits, but these efforts help us to diversify our economy and hopefully get us off this boom-bust roller coaster.
Time for one or two more questions before we get to closing remarks. We'll move to that far microphone over there.
Okay, my name is Scott. I've been in the Bow Valley for a long time. Pardon me. And this is on social issues, especially with our vulnerable populations, the LGBTQ communities, and also women who are in need of abortions. There's been a lot of disturbing remarks and stuff during the campaign about, Ron DeSantis, support of Ron DeSantis, who is very anti-gay and anti-abortion, and also with Artur Pawlowski and stuff. And so I'm just wondering, the question would be, do you support a woman's right to choose? Like, which are you pro-choice or pro-life in those camps?
Okay.
And that would be mainly for the, well, actually, if anybody wants to answer that, but certainly, Miranda and Sarah.
Okay. So Miranda?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate this question. And I know this comes up every election. It seems to be one of the most topical issues that comes up every election, whether that's federal or provincial. What I will say is that in Alberta, there's absolutely no question that we are going to continue to fund these services. There's no question of defunding them in Alberta, and the government will continue to support the clinics that are there. I will say, I think it's important to note that we also support religious freedom as well. Our caucus is made up of diverse views. I'm not going to shy away from that. And there are members of our caucus who are pro-life. And I think it's important that we have Albertans in our caucus that reflect every view, every walk of life, and every religion across the province. We have Sikhs, we have Hindus, we have Muslims in our caucus, we have Christians, Catholics, got a couple Mormons. I think it's really important to recognize that while we will continue to have these services available in Alberta, it is also important to ensure that we don't discriminate against others who have their freedom of religion in the province as well, by suggesting that they may not be compassionate people either. I think it's really important, really, whenever this conversation comes up, that everyone is allowed to have their perspective. And I'm proud to say that I'm part of a government that whenever there is a matter of conscience that comes to the floor, we do not have a whipped vote on that matter. We have a free vote. Any conscious vote that comes before our caucus has always been a free vote. And I'm proud to say that we are a government that will support choice, whatever that choice may look like.
I'd just follow up on that. It'd be really good to know your personal views on that. Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
Sorry, she's had her 90 seconds, so we'll get to Sarah for that question.
A woman's right to choose is her right to choose whatever she wants to do for a profession, whatever she wants to do as a family, who she wants to live with, who she wants to love, who they want to love. Love is love. Yes, so all of those things. And the NDP you know, there is no question that those supports will be provided for women. The NDP is taking it a little bit farther, and we will be providing free prescription contraception for all women in Alberta if they want it, which I think is a really valuable part of this conversation. And yeah, a woman's right to choose is to choose whatever she likes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So like John, I'd like to echo a big thank you to all four of you. It's not an easy task, so thank you very much. This too is to Sarah and Miranda. Gentlemen, I apologize, but I want to go deeper than platform and stump speeches to your party policies. So can the two of you explain how your party has integrated your policies regarding housing, labor, training and education, and accessibility to childcare to ensure we have sustainable communities? As to be blunt, right now what you've said tonight is simply taking care of the problems we have today, and as far as I'm concerned, aren't really looking into the future.
We'll start with Sarah on that one and then go to Miranda.
Can I just ask, you said housing, labor, childcare, and there was just one
Training
more.
And education.
Training and education.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, as an interdisciplinary scientist, I can tell you that I look at everything from an interdisciplinary perspective. It was kind of drilled into my brain during my PhD. So housing and labor and childcare and training and education for the Bow Valley, this is all one thing, right? Like training and education is critical to raise the next generation of Albertans to pursue whatever profession they want to pursue. And we have a whole bunch of post-secondary supports in place, and I could tell you about that, but you don't want to hear it. You told me not to. And making sure that people, when they are ready to live and work in the Bow Valley, that they have somewhere to live is a critical part of that. That helps support our businesses so that they can attract staff, and those staff have somewhere to live, hopefully to plant roots and call the Bow Valley home. And I think that that's an important part of how labor and housing tie together, especially in the Bow Valley where housing is in such a crisis right now. And in terms of childcare, I mean, all of this is about how we raise healthy families, right? We need homes for families to live in, the parents need to go to work, and childcare needs to be affordable so that families can go to work and can know that their children are well looked after while they're there. So we are going to be, and the UCP is committed to this too, the $10 a day childcare. We're just going to bring it in as soon as we can. So all those things tie together, I think.
Well, Brenda, we miss you up here. It's lonely without another seat.
Just wait, Miranda.
I will say this is a really great question because our economy, as it changes, as our workforce changes, the government policy needs to reflect that. If we want to solve the labor shortages, we have to have housing to support and to place those people in when they arrive in Canada or when they move across the country to our community. Once they arrive here, childcare is so important. Parents need to be able to afford to work. You shouldn't have to say that, but that is one of the most important things, is ensure that we have childcare, housing, labor, that we can fill all of these gaps. But especially I want to talk about training, because I think this is something that's really important that, I know you don't want to hear talking points, but something we've done a lot of work on the past 4 years is to reform the way that our post-secondary institutions work, to ensure that we are preparing our graduates and those coming into post-secondary institutions for the Alberta of the future, not for the Alberta of yesterday, but for the Albertas that are emerging. We've allocated quite a lot of resources and time and energy to ensure, we called it the Skills for Jobs program, which perhaps is conveniently named, but it really had an emphasis on doing targeted market research on where our economy is today and where it's expected to be tomorrow and where we want it to be tomorrow. So not just where it's naturally going, but where we want to steer it and what sectors we believe should be important to Alberta and a natural fit. And then we have funded the creation of new university seats and brand new programs and degree programs to fit those needs proactively so that we can get ahead of that labor curve and try to start graduating Albertans to fit the needs not of today but of tomorrow.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to closing remarks now. So we have, no, unfortunately, we've run out of time for audience questions. So there will be an opportunity.
I'm 87 years old. I couldn't stay on the line before.
You'll have an opportunity to ask questions of the candidates outside after the event if you have anything specific you want to ask.
I'd like to have a short question.
I'm sorry, we don't have time for any further questions.
Well, good to know you, because that's probably, I didn't get the question. You did not allow me because you know.
That's not...
maybe that's my opinion.
No, that's not true at all.
Well, then let me...
Okay, so we're going to move on to closing remarks right now. We're going to give the candidates... Excuse me? Okay, we're going to move on to closing.
Gentlemen, we're done.
Yeah, we're sorry. We're sorry. That's us who make the rules, and it doesn't matter who the people are. Our time is our time, out of respect for everybody here. We're so sorry you didn't get that question answered.
Can we have a straw vote on it?
Sorry, sir.
We're going to move on to closing remarks now. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make their remarks, which is quite a bit of time. We're going to do that in alphabetical order based on last name. So it'll be Reagan Boychuk, Sarah Almaligi, Kyle Jubb, and then Miranda Rosen. So Reagan, if you'd like to get started.
Thanks. I'm an Albertan who wants other Albertans to believe that our province can be better. The Green Party of Alberta and our leader, Jordan Wilkie, believe Alberta can be better, and we have some big picture solutions that owners can afford. We can solve these problems, we can afford the solutions, if we act like owners. From that starting point, which only a minority government and Green Party MLAs can achieve, solving the rest of Alberta's challenges will be downhill. Some of the focuses of the Green Party, like sustainability and the economy, to get beyond the boom and bust, a guaranteed basic income to help support Albertans, making jobs a guarantee. Every able-bodied Albertan should have a job, and the government needs to step in and create more pathways for unfulfilled positions while amplifying job creation in diverse sectors of the economy. The next government needs to work with unions instead of against them. Unions help support economic growth and social justice and protect the working class that makes up the vast majority of this province. And one of the things that's close to my heart is a reclamation jobs boom. The potential there is for holding industry accountable to the law. Everyone repeats in the same sentence that they're legally obliged to do that work, except the government doesn't hold them accountable. The research we did, if we did that, if we held them to a minimum standard of cleaning up, we could create 10,000 oil and gas jobs in Alberta every year for the next 25 years. That's an exciting opportunity with zero cost to the budget. No retraining, no relocation, oil and gas riggers doing what they do where they do it. It's a no-brainer. You should ask your MLA why they don't support it, why their government never moved it forward. The Green Party is offering that, and it would be one of the principles of a coalition government, along with public health care being a right, that we need to expand the universal health care system in Alberta to include comprehensive health care, which includes mental health care, physiotherapy, pharmacare, dental care, optical services, and hearing services. It aims to provide universal care regardless of economic status, race, or gender. It will help ensure everyone in Alberta has access to the health care they need to maintain good health, prevent illness, and manage chronic health conditions. Alberta's blessed. We have everything we need to flourish. We have trillions of dollars of much-needed resources. We have our own bank, ATB, who could finance all sorts of things if we acted like owners. And we're running out of time if we're going to do that. Alberta's first minority government could be a new step in the opposite direction that this province desperately needs to salvage a viable future against looming challenges. The leading two parties won't give that to us if we beg them. We're going to have to hold them accountable in a minority government.
Right, thank you, Reagan. Sarah?
Tonight has been a really great evening filled with rich discussion, so thank you for that. And thank you to my fellow candidates for that as well. One of the things I love best about living in this valley is the diversity of people doing so many different things. Each of you is a very special part of our community, and thank you for participating in our democracy and considering who will be the best person to represent our riding. Spoiler alert, I think it's me. I was drawn to run for MLA because I wanted to bring some integrity and honesty to provincial politics. As a scientist, I value using data to inform decisions. As a conservationist, I value working collaboratively with everyone to define creative solutions to complex problems. As a mother, wife, and Bow Valley resident, I value time outside with my family where we can connect and appreciate the amazing parks we call our backyard. Over the last 16 years, I've seen this valley change and stay the same. Changes have come with dramatically increasing visitor volumes, increased traffic congestion, increased cost of living, and so much more. Of course, the mountains have always stayed pretty much the same, as has the diverse fabric of our communities. I've been working for years to find and test solutions to better visitor use management, solutions that will ensure visitors enjoy their time here, our local businesses thrive, our wildlife populations remain abundant, and our communities retain their uniqueness. It surprised me to learn there was no doctors accepting new patients across the riding, or that last summer there were several occasions when we were without ambulances, or that there was no baby delivery staff in the Canmore Hospital on weekends due to staffing shortages. Sorry, ladies, if you want to have a baby here, make sure it's on a weekday. These things scared me. The Alberta NDP has a plan to increase the capacity of our healthcare system and implement family health teams to serve you and your family. At the doors, I hear time and time again that life has gotten too expensive here. Our plan to cap monthly utilities and car insurance will help. Our plan for affordable housing will help too. We will make life more affordable for you. Tourism is the foundation of our economy here, and we are lucky to have so many businesses that provide such incredible services. There are many ways to plan for tourism strategically over the long term so that visitors stay here, spend more money here, and appreciate our community, leaving it better than how they found it. I have the experience to help make that happen. The Banff-Kananaskis riding is a priority for me, obviously, but it's also a priority for the Alberta NDP. With me as your champion in Edmonton, I will continue to make sure your views are shared and part of the conversation in the legislature. Trust me, I've got your back.
Well, these two ladies are very good politicians. I was a little unprepared today, obviously. I didn't realize we had opening and closing statements like that, but yeah, I think there's bigger problems. Obviously, there's problems with housing in Canmore. There's problems with affordability. I mean, the way it's going right now, I don't think that's going to change very soon. Obviously, everyone would like help and solutions to do so, and we would obviously be working to help make solutions to do so. As an MLA, I would basically be the voice of the people for the people. I don't feel like the government's done that 100% for us for a long time. I'm also a little disappointed that nothing has been discussed about what's happened in the past 3 years. I'm tired of living with the potential of being in a concentration camp, essentially. Not allowed to fly to go visit my mother-in-law dying of cancer, have to drive across the country at Christmas. Like, there's some really disgusting things that have happened, and I'm worried for Alberta and Canada being turned into a communist state. And as your leader, we will ensure that this never happens again. We need to be free. We need to run Alberta like a business. That will not be me, by the way. That will be a professional who knows how to work the budget properly. But I want to work for you, listen to you, get your word out, but most of all, make sure you're free. You should be free to do whatever you want in Canada, whenever you want in Canada, without breaking the law. And that is my goal in being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And Miranda.
Thank you, Rob. Well, this election, there is so much on the line. And 4 years ago, our United Conservatives were elected on a clear platform of change with the largest mandate in Alberta history. And that's because at that time, Albertans were so desperate for change after years of economic stagnation and decline. And today, we can't afford to remember or to forget where we came from. I personally, as I said earlier, ran because I wanted to build a future where every single Albertan, no matter whether you were retirement age or a young Albertan such as myself, could build and visualize the future of your dreams in this province. And today, I'm so proud to say that Alberta is once again that place to be. In 4 short years, we've gone from economic decline to economic growth. We've created so many hundreds of thousands of jobs, diversified our economy, balanced our budget, and put our province in a very strong fiscal position despite a lot of the global chaos that's happening around the rest of the world. And none of that was accident. That was a result of direct, intentional policies to restart our economy and insulate our province in the face of all the headwinds. And with that laser focus, we were also able to invest in areas that I know Albertans and many of you in this room care the most about: healthcare, education, mental health, social services, community services, affordable housing, environmental protection. And for the first time in a long time, we've been able to give tourism a real active seat at the decision-making table in our government, with economic policy that puts tourism in a leading role in Alberta's economic future. We've invested in our wild, conserved our Rockies, we've invested in conservation, expanding our provincial park networks, and we've done so much together. But looking at all that we've accomplished as a province, I think it's important to remember the importance of investing locally as well. And sometimes I have these reminders of what it's all about. And this isn't quite so local here, but I spoke to a grade 6 class in Bragg Creek a few months ago, and they asked me what my best accomplishment was from the community, and I thought about it, and a few years ago we installed some traffic lights at the Bragg Creek intersection that completely alleviated these traffic backlogs. And I told these kids, I said, "Do you remember the traffic problems?" And they all said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I got those traffic lights built." And this entire 3 rooms of grade 5 and 6 students went, "Whoa!" And it was this moment where all of these kids were so impressed at the simplest little thing. And I think that's what this is all about, is remembering the communities that send us to Edmonton, representing the people and the needs of those unique communities. For us, it's the Nordic Centre upgrades, it's the wildlife overpasses, it's the affordable housing and the land transfers, it's in bringing our biathlon World Cups back to town. It's little things like that that we can do to build a better Bow Valley when we listen and engage with the community, whether that be the business owners, the community groups, the entrepreneurs, the town administration. Really what this is about is taking the important needs of our communities to Edmonton and building broader economic policy for the entire province that starts here at home. And I hope that I've been able to do that the past 4 years, and with your support, I hope that I can continue to build a better Bow Valley for the next 4 years and continue to move Alberta forward with all of my colleagues in Edmonton.
One final time, can we get a big hand for all our candidates? Taking the time to be here tonight, some really great answers provided. An opportunity to find out a little bit more about what they stand for, what they represent, maybe ask them some personal or some one-on-one questions. In the foyer, the bar is about to be open. I'd like to give a big thanks to all of the organizers for making this forum possible, and for you for coming and being democratically engaged. Don't forget to vote May 29th. Have a fantastic evening.